Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public board meeting of March 12th, 2024. My name is Kat Eddy, and I'm chairperson of the Board of Education for ST 72. I'd like to start this meeting by acknowledging that the Campbell River Board of Education is holding this meeting this evening on the traditional territory of the Leaquidol people. Please note that there is a 10 to 30 second production delay between live events that you are viewing and the meeting participants. The question and answer function is open online for questions on agenda items throughout this meeting, and a final call for questions will be made after the last agenda item, and questions will be addressed at the end of the session. This evening, I would like to start with my chairperson's remarks, but first I'll call the meeting to order. So my chairperson's remarks for March 12th, 2024. January 24 saw the release of SD 72 Campbell River's 2024 to 2028 strategic plan. The primary function of your elected Board of Education is to discuss strategic priorities, goals, and measurements, and build a plan that will guide the district for the next 4 years. We as governors in the education system believe in a cycle of continuous improvement and hold student success at the center of every decision that we make. In the last public board meeting, we reviewed and shared the results of the How Are We Doing report. This report tracks and compares the progress of Indigenous and non-Indigenous learners in achievement of foundational learning goals, including literacy, numeracy, and 5- and 6-year graduation rates within our district and throughout the province. Our top goal under the strategic priority to honor Indigenous worldviews and perspectives is equitable education outcomes for Indigenous students across all measures. A further goal under the strategic priority of evolving for tomorrow is grade level proficiency in literacy and numeracy. The results presented through the How Are We Doing report speak to the work to be done and should be viewed as a change catalyst and not a criticism. The data begins to highlight key points that require our attention to improve outcomes for all of our children. This evening, Superintendent Manning will share the results of the 2023 BC Adolescent Health Survey results for the Campbell River District, entitled the McCreary Report. The McCreary Report measures youth health indicators of students in grades 7 to 12 through distribution of student surveys and compilation of the results. It is a temperature check on students as whole individuals, not just summaries of their academic achievements. It speaks to the real lives of kids, celebrates them feeling mostly connected and safe in our schools, and begins to gather student voice regarding ways to improve the education system. We as a board are committed to regularly reviewing data publicly. These data reviews help us to share achievements, frame challenges, guide budgetary allocations, and continue important conversations that make a targeted difference in the lives of our kids. If you would like more information on SD 72 Campbell River's strategic priorities through 2028, we encourage you to review the 2024-2028 strategic plan found on the school district website. And on to superintendent remarks.
Thank you, Chair Eddy. I just simply can't believe how many activities have taken place since the last board meeting, and I just wanted to take a moment tonight to highlight a few of the ones that I was able to attend. I wanted to start with the Battle of the Books that was at Timberline High School, Timberline Secondary, and Chair Eddy was the moderator for that event. It was just really great to see the kids so engaged and excited about the books they were reading, able to answer comprehension questions about those books and stories. And the parent enthusiasm, everyone with posters in the crowd cheering their kids on. It was just really great to see. So it's my first experience of that. I'm looking forward to doing that again in the future. I was also able to be at Timberline for Guys and Dolls. Their theatrical performance, that was just excellent. Once again, practically sold out show. The kids put on a spectacular performance, and I think everyone was very much entertained, and the sets were great. It was just a really good time. And I know Kerry High is having their SpongeBob musical coming up shortly after spring break in early April, so make sure you get your tickets to that. I did want to point out, I mentioned it, but I did want to point out Michael Bortolato's visit to our school district, and he came and shared his story of inclusion and and his version of social emotional learning and how to be inclusive and caring and kind. Just an amazing speaker. Michael suffers from a cerebral palsy and has a difficult time speaking, but that just seems to make kids more engaged in what he's saying. They try hard, really hard to listen, and he has a wonderful message. And we even received that at the board office, an email from a parent who was so grateful for the message that he shared, and how impactful it was for her daughter who had a disability, and she just wanted to pass along personal thanks to Michael. And so we made sure we sent that to him. He has now moved on and is down in Courtney Comox doing the similar presentations, but we were really fortunate to have him here. And he is from Campbell River. He went to Sayward as an elementary student and Southgate as a middle school student, and might even been high school back then. He was
81.
There you go. Very happy to be in our district, and we were really happy to have him. Another highlight for me was visiting Phoenix and going to the Indigenous luncheon that celebrated some of their Indigenous students and their accomplishments. Parents, grandparents, staff had a chance to be there, and staff talked and spoke very highly of the Indigenous students that were being honored. So that was really nice to be a part of. We also went to a Superintendent Student Leadership Council that Secretary Treasurer Patrick presented the budget to those students. Had a really great engaging session with them, as we always do. We only have 2 more sessions with them, and it'll be sad when those are over, because they're a great group and very insightful, and they are very informative for us in the work that we do. The last thing I wanted to mention was the BDTA training day, and that was Behavioral Digital Threat Assessment Training. We hosted it here. Associate Superintendent Kyle organized it. We had 5, I think, public school districts that attended, along with a couple of independent school districts. So almost 100 people there. Just had a really great day of learning, and it was nice to connect with colleagues from across the island. So it's been a busy time, but an exciting time. And, we're getting down to the finish line here, heading towards spring break in 3 days, and just wanted to wish everyone a wonderful spring break, whether you're going somewhere exotic or whether you're staying here in Campbell River. I hope you have a great time and a recharge for when we come back and do it all over again.
Thank you, Superintendent Manning. Moving on to approval of the minutes of the meeting of February 27th, 24. Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee Glanish. All those in favor? Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, are there any additions or alterations to the agenda? Seeing none. The approval of agenda that the board declares the public interest requires the meeting, oops, wrong one, that the agenda is hereby approved as circulated. Trustee Gills, seconded by Trustee Harper. All those in favor? And Trustee Gillis, the report of board decisions.
The confidential meeting today dealt with teaching, administrative, and support staff changes, as well as financial issues.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gillis. There are no correspondence, public submission, or agenda submissions this evening. 11A, which is educational submissions. Eric Berg and Natalie Crawshaw.
All right, yeah, and then the owl can see you.
Okay. Okay.
You're good?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Welcome.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Derek Berg. I'm a counselor at Timberline Secondary School and the chair of the SD 72 Scholarship Committee. Natalie Crawshaw is Senior Executive Assistant to the Superintendent and Secretary Treasurer. And Natalie plays a very important role in organizing the district scholarships and ministry program. The hours that she spends leading up to our ceremonies ensures that everything runs smoothly. So basically, it doesn't happen. First off, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak about the program tonight. The time given, we'd like to give you an overview of what is involved, who works behind the scenes, where the money comes from, and the process in selecting the students for the different bursaries and scholarships. Personally, I've been involved with this program at this capacity since 2018. Each secondary school has a counselor attached to the program, so myself at Timberline, Marilyn Lloyd at Carey High, and Kate Deagle at Rogon work with their schools directly. I think it's also important right now to thank the previous district staff who played an integral role in developing and maintaining this program. For example, Helen Moats, Jerry Gillis, Jane Komatiki, Dale McLaughlin, Lynn Logan, and many other district staff who have contributed to the program over the years. They basically started it, got it running, and left it for me to keep going. So how it works, what we do. Each year, through generous donations from local organizations, businesses, and individuals, approximately $90,000 are given out to our students. These students are attending university and college and trades programs. It's important to note these scholarships and bursaries are in addition to the Ministry of Education and Child Care scholarships. They're an important source of funding for students pursuing post-secondary education. Common question we get from students, parents, and other individuals: what's the difference between a scholarship and a bursary? In general, bursaries are most often based off of financial need. So in our application process, we actually do rank financial need of the students for certain bursaries, and it's all confidential. That's awarded at our awards nights. While scholarships are based on specific criteria such as programs, academic standing, or decisions made by organizations through an application process. In regards to the application process, we're actually right in the heat of things right now. Before spring break and after spring break is when it kind of all happens. Students are able to access these applications directly from their school. Students are able to complete a general application to access upwards of 30 different local bursaries and scholarships. So it's one application for a variety of different ones in the community. This application asks students a variety of questions such as financial need, program studies, family connections. A lot of the bursaries do prioritize the bursaries and scholarships to family connections to organizations, if there are some. Once applications are submitted, we select recipients for each bursary or scholarship. The majority of the applications have been posted this week and are due at the end of April. At the end of May, beginning of June, we have a bursary and scholarship awards night where the donors come to the schools to present to our students. Our personal note, this is really a highlight of the school year for me. It's one of the few times where we get to really celebrate the hard work, success of our students. That, you know, we get some kids who in grade 9, school wasn't for them. Grade 10, it still wasn't for them. Grade 11, it still wasn't for them. And then things click in grade 12 and they realize they can go to University of Trades program, they realize their scholarships and bursaries to apply. And then just the look on their face that night and how proud their parents are when they get those awards is pretty amazing. It's definitely a highlight for me, and I think the other counselors will stick as well.
I'd just like to highlight the work that the counselors do at schools in getting the awards information to the students, encouraging them to apply, working on their applications over spring break, because you know that there's small essays. There's lots of references they have to collect, and you and Marilyn and Kate end up, you know, guiding the students through that, a lot of the applications and helping them with ideas and references. So
Thank you.
that's a big piece.
Any questions?
Sorry,
Well, first of all, thank you both, because I know that that's a huge responsibility, but it has the ability to transform lives, as you know, by giving them that recognition and boost. And I just wondered, for all of our benefit, what do you see as the great benefits of a centralized distribution the way and review as you do it? It seems like it's a lot of work on your part, but there must be some real benefits from your perspective as to how this is organized within the district.
It's very hands-on.
It is, and the one thing that's nice about the general application, well, the ones that we have control over, is we make it really equitable. So
Right.
if students rank themselves on this financial need, we try to ensure that if there's 5 students with this kind of need, that they're roughly getting the same amount of funding. So you
Wonderful.
balance things around. So yeah, that's one of the nice things about having the central operation.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Any further questions? Thank you for that work and having a son who was a recipient of a scholarship last year. Thank you for putting in the effort to help contribute to his post-secondary education.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Dick. So on to administrative staffing allocation increases, superintendent and manager.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Eddie. In your board package, you'll find an elementary admin time proposal. I just wanted to speak to that a little bit, give the board some background on this. Several years ago, admin time was decreased in the school district and that's what's shown under the current formula, the center column. And our proposal would go back to the way it used to be 5 or 6 years ago. And it would increase admin time at Georgia Park by 0.1. It would go from 1.1 to 1.2. Willow Point would go from 1.1 to 1.2, as would Penfield and Pinecrest. Pinecrest is a unique example because they currently this year do not have a vice principal position, but due to an increase in enrollment, they meet the threshold that the district had already established for vice principal. So under the current guidelines, that principalship or vice principalship would be a 0.1 position. And in this model, we propose that it would be 0.2. And the whole purpose behind this proposition is that we feel like our vice principals are training to become principals. And if you have 0.1 admin time, you're getting a half a day a week to do the job of an administrator in the school building. We just don't feel like that's enough to build capacity. We think that, 0.2 gives 1 full day a week where they can be an administrator of that building. It could be split up to, one morning, one afternoon, so that they can get a variety of opportunities throughout the week. So the reason we're bringing this back, we think it is a minimal cost. Ideally, actually what happens is the vice principal doesn't get any extra time or any extra salary increase. That actually goes to a teaching position that's hired to fill in for the teaching position that's vacated when they move into an administrative position. In one of the points here, number 3, it mentions that historically the reduction to 0.1 VP time and in terms of a local context is like qualified people and people who we think would be good leaders turning down the opportunity to apply because they just didn't think it was worth it to do all that extra work in half a day's time and you have that extra responsibility. So, in the era that we're in now, we're always trying to build capacity and urge leadership and new young leaders. And we think this will help with that as well. I just wonder if the board has any questions.
Any questions?
I'm actually curious about the comment that historically it's impacted the number of applicants, and is that basically a word of mouth or just have you noticed a trend over time?
It's actually locally when an application would go out for vice principals and we'd only receive 2 or 3. I think Associate Superintendent says
it's really highlighted when we do elementary specific vice principal postings. For example, we have one right now that's a general posting. It may be elementary, middle, high, and most of the applicants are secondary or middle school and above. When it's specific to elementary, the numbers are usually less than 5.
And often not local.
And not local.
Trustee Hagan?
I'd like to move approval of the request.
I do have a motion. Is there any further discussion?
I just wanted to just get a bit of clarification on, so you're saying that moving from 0.1 to 0.2, I understand that it makes sense to give the VP a little bit more experience. A full day as compared to half a day is pretty significant over time, but it is paid as a teaching position, you said?
So what that means, Trustee Gladish, is that the time is allotted to the vice principal, but the time they vacate from the classroom is filled in by a teacher. And the
Okay,
teacher
okay,
would get that time.
okay. That's good. Thank you.
So to move the motion that the board approve the administrative staffing increases for the 24-25 school year as outlined in the report, presented by Superintendent Jeff Manning. Trustee Hagan
So
is
moved.
a mover. May I have a seconder? Trustee Gillis, all those in favor? Approved. Thank you, Superintendent Manning. And on to, item 13A, which is the BC Adolescent Health Survey or the McCreary Report. Superintendent Manning.
I'm gonna use the clicker and we'll see if this works, Mr. Hanson. Okay, the Campbell River Adolescent Health Survey, it's known as the McCreary Report. That's what it was always known as in the past. And it's a survey that talks really about the wholeness of the student, not so much about their academic ability that they've done, but what their home life is like, what their time use is like in their personal and private time, and it gives us some very interesting information. There we go, just there. So the Adolescent Youth Survey covers all of those topics. So I won't read them all, but you know, the first part is going to be some student demographics, so you get to know who the students are in our school district. It talks about home life, their material well-being, some of the school experience, mental health, physical health, relationships and connections. The report is actually a 43-page report. It's in your package. I don't speak to every single thing in there, so I condensed it a little bit, but hopefully highlighting some interesting things from our students here in Campbell River. So the report was done 5 years ago. It's done every 5 years. So it was done in 2018. Most of the students that took the report were born in Canada. 5% had arrived as international students and others were from other parts of the world or parts of the province. The age, as was mentioned earlier by Chair Eddy, is 7 to grade 12, so 12 years to 18 years. You see the demographic there. The racial identity, you can see for us, 87% were white, 12% Indigenous, and then very small populations of other segments. I do want to point out that when you see this survey and you see the results, sometimes the numbers do not add up to 100%. That is because of a rounding issue. Sometimes if they were rounding the number, or in some cases, students answered more than one question, or they were allowed to respond to more than one outcome. So they might have responded 3 or 4 times. So we'll see a higher percentage. So the first thing we're going to look at is unstable housing. And you see there that 77% of our students have pretty stable housing. They measured this by whether students had moved in the last 12 months. But there are 20% that have moved once or twice, and 3 or more times there's 4%. You think about that for a school year, a family uprooting 4 times in a year, how disruptive that would be to their overall life, not just their learning. Some numbers, this was very interesting. Parental monitoring. So students felt that parents monitored their free time about 74% of the time. They were always kind of monitoring. But their online time, 60% of the time, students feel that parents don't know what they're doing online. That's like more than half of the time. So that's an interesting observation. School experience. So how students feel about their school experience. This is an interesting chart because I think you really just have to look at the disagreed or strongly disagreed column to get the sense, because neither agreed or disagreed just means they either the question didn't resonate with them, so they just were, I'm just going to go somewhere in the middle on this question. but really felt like a part of their school. 15% disagreed. Happy to be at school. 23% disagreed. I did like the stat that they felt school staff expected them to do well. Only 7% disagreed with that. So, 93% are either strongly feel that or like, yeah, I think they do. That wasn't a strong response. And then the rest of the percents are there in terms of how students or how teachers felt or cared about them. This was interesting too, school absences. If they missed 1 or 2 days or missed 3 or more days, the vast majority were due to illness, and then followed very closely by appointments that were made by families. The two other ones that stick out are sleeping in, if they missed 1 or 2 days, but family responsibilities also creeps in there with students who are doing things out of school time. Skipping 15%, but it's not out of control or anything. This was really interesting because educational plans, almost 70% of the students plan to go to post-secondary education. So they're thinking, I'm gonna move on with this. There are lots of options given here for kids to answer. So only 1% said, oh, I don't think I'm gonna pass high school. So 99% feel like they're going to get through. But when they say either you didn't know or you hadn't thought about it, that kind of opens up the options for kids to make choices. School safety. This is interesting because it differed a little bit from the student learning survey. On the school safety one, it talks about where you feel the most safe. And it's interesting that library comes in number 1, 94% of the time. Students felt 94% of the time they usually or always feel safe when they're in the library. When they're in a class area, it's 88%. I thought the interesting stat here that really differed from the student learning survey is the last one, getting to and from school. On our student learning survey, it was pointed out that students did not feel as safe coming to or going home from school. This it showed 80%, 87% always or usually felt safe to and from school. So it'd be interesting to find out why that stat is different. Student health. So a mental health condition, 26% of the students commonly reported that they felt that they had a mental health condition or issue, followed by a learning disability at 11%. And the next stat is really interesting because it talks about pinpointing what they thought that specific mental health issue or that issue was, and an anxiety order came up at 28%, followed by ADHD or ADD, and then depression was thrown in there too. So, and that mirrors what's happening provincially. There's a provincial McCreary report as well. This one is specifically for Campbell River. On that note, if students are feeling stressed out or anxious, the question is asked, well, how well do you manage your stress? The good news is that almost 75% of students feel like they manage it fairly well, or very well. And that still means 1 out of 4 is saying they think they're managing it poorly. So that's something to be aware of. Access to mental health services. 43% of students, if they didn't access it in that. So let's go back to the front here in this one. 69% of students felt they didn't need mental health services. So 20%, 11% felt they were able to access, and 20% did not access the services they needed. So of that 20%, why didn't they access those services? 43% said they didn't know where to go. But the high ones are 59%. They didn't want their parent or guardian to find out they were accessing, followed very closely by 44% that said they were worried their information wouldn't be kept confidential. So a huge at-risk feeling, I think, by the youth saying, I don't want to get these supports or go for help because someone's gonna find out about it. Where do students go when they wanna access information on, mental health? Well, a friend is obvious, 37%, but a family member was way up there at 45%. That the sad thing is that didn't go anywhere for information was pretty high at 32%. So, we need to, that tells me from a school district perspective, we need to do a better job of informing our students, especially our secondary, middle school students, where the access points are for this information. And we think we do a good job, but these stats kind of fly in the face of that a little bit. So we have to keep promoting. Now we move on to substance use. So it's going to talk about smoking, vaping, alcohol, and cannabis use. Vaping is the big one that's on the rise. So 35% of our students have at least tried vaping. The ages are what really sticks out to me. 12, 13, and 14. That's when they're first getting into that and possibly getting addicted. It does taper off the older they get. And that's jives with what we've talked to our student leadership students about as well. They've shared that there is, and the leadership students I've spoken to in the past have shared that vaping is a big problem, but it's mostly at the younger ages and the younger grades. And then this shows that part is true for our school district. That's just percentages on students who have tried vaping or vaped in the last 30 days. It goes from 0 days all the way up to all 30 days. So, someone who's vaping every day has got an addiction problem, and that's 28% of the students who have vaped. Another kind of scary stat is, 56% of those students vape within 5 minutes of waking up. It's one of the first things that they want to do. Just as a point of information, we just handed out at our last district leadership team meeting, information pamphlets, posters, brochures on vaping. The Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health have put a lot of information into this. So we're trying to get that into our students' hands as soon as possible. We moved from vaping to smoking. 20% of students had smoked, and that excludes ceremonial tobacco. You compare that to 35% of students who vape. So smoking is on the decline, vaping is on the rise. Once again, the ages, the 12 years old, 20%. This one's a little bit more steady, but the big spike at 12 is something to be aware of, because that allows us to target our audience and say, hey, if we have 20% of these smokers starting at 12 years old, we need to be teaching them when they're 10 and 11. Which sometimes feels too soon for parents and educators, but the stats are showing us differently. And that's the same thing as the vaping question. You have 9% of the students are smoking 10 or more days in a row. Alcohol, there's the spike at 14. So 49% of students had ever drunk alcohol, and that goes beyond just taking a couple of sips with your parents at dinner or something like that. So the age students first drank alcohol, 14 is the spike there, but 13 and 14 pretty close. And then once again, the number of days students are drinking alcohol in the past 30 days. When you look at that top bracket, it tells you that 4% have a big problem. They already have an alcohol addiction. And then number of days students drank 5 or more drinks. Once again, you get that 4% that kind of stands out, 4 or 6%. Those are the worrisome students we have to be aware of. We move on to cannabis use. It's getting a little bit later where students first use it, spiking at 14, but 13, 14, 15. Always interesting to see that. And then once again, the same number of days students use cannabis. 13% of our kids are using it all 30 days that have tried this. Not 13% of our population, 30% that said that they had tried cannabis. And then this was just curious. This is in the majority of students, 60% had not used alcohol or other substances in the 12 months. But over half of those who had used it reported negative consequences. So 40% that had used it, it either passed out, couldn't remember what they had done. So it just kind of gives you maybe a chart, a teachable moment here for students to say, look at all these negative consequences when you use these substances. Is it really worth it? Moving on to safety, violence, harassment, abuse. How do students feel safe in their neighborhood during the day? 90% of the time, they always feel safe. Inside their home, 89% of the time, they feel safe. Their neighborhood at night, does it ever drop from 90% to 66%? And then on weekends, it drops down to 55%. So that's I'd like to get to ask questions beyond this that say, okay, what is it about your neighborhood at night that makes you feel the most unsafe? Discrimination. This is not a good one for us in particular. Where students experience discrimination in the last 12 months at school was the highest percentage, 29%. Now you can say kids are at school most of the time together, and there's a large number of them, so there probably is a greater opportunity to feel that way. But school followed by online, social media were the top two. And then reasons students perceived to be they were discriminated against. The highest one was their physical appearance. Weight is related to that probably too. So those two are the top ones. Gender and sex and sexual orientation were the other two that were high in that list. And then lastly on this section is victimization. Teased to the point of feeling extreme discomfort. 36% of students have been teased to that point. Socially excluded, 43%. And I wonder what that would have looked like before social media came into being. Physically attacked or assaulted, 11%. That's pretty high. There were also, they asked as a perpetrator, have you ever teased, socially excluded, or physically attacked another youth? 8% of students said that they had. 20 in the text below, 21% of students reported that they had been cyberbullied, and 12% had perpetrated online bullying themselves. This is a busy looking slide, but this is almost the last one. I like this slide because the first column tells us what the McCreary report told us in 2018 and what it's telling us 5 years later in 2023. So 84% of students rated their overall health as good or excellent in 2018. That's down to 72%. 27% had smoked tobacco. That's down to 20%. So we've dropped 7% there. 32% and 33% for trying cannabis. There's a tiny little symbol that you probably can't see, but it basically means the change over time is not statistically significant. So we've stayed the same with cannabis from 2018 to 2023. This is interesting. 18% in 2018 had taken care of a relative on an average school day. That's jumped up to 24%. So there's a lot of home care happening. 58% slept for at least 8 hours 5 years ago. That's down to 42% sleeping at least 8 hours. 18% of kids didn't eat breakfast on school days in 2018. That has jumped up to 38%. 24% had skipped school in the past month. Once again, not statistically significant. We're down to 23 skipping, so that's staying about the same. And then this is interesting, 83% plan to attend post-secondary education in 2018, down to 69%, that's 7%. Also in 2023, it's just stats that aren't related in a way that you can compare it to previous years. But we do have the 35% that have vaped, which has gone way up, and 49% trying alcohol. The good news is 90% of kids exercise for 60 minutes at least one day in the past week, and 23% did all the time. The sleep follows along, 34% reporting their sleep was interrupted. 11% going to bed feeling like they were hungry because there wasn't enough food in the house. And then the 60% feel quite or very hopeful for their future, was interesting too. It's just that it's lots of, stats about how kids are feeling, and it leads to the question, what can we do for those students, as a school district? I wanted to ask if there are any questions from the board on it.
Just to be clear, those numbers that the 2023 is based on the population of 2018. So did I mishear that? It didn't take 5 years to compile all.
No, sorry, it's just complete that, the same survey or a very similar survey given in 2023, the direct comparables were because the exact same question was asked. They do upgrade the McCreary survey and add questions as they see relevance, for instance, for baking and things like that, that new trends, they will add those questions to the survey.
Yeah.
So our 2023 data is very reflective of a COVID era.
Yeah,
I mean, so
Yeah.
there's that.
and it's happened, sorry, that.
Yeah.
Trustee Glenish?
We heard last meeting about how are we doing? And we called that about 25% of our students go on to post-secondary. Whereas in 218, 82% plan to go to post-secondary, and in 23, 69% plan to go on post-secondary. So the reality is that they're not moving on unless they're going on to something like skilled trades, which we don't know. Because I don't think we have data on that, but I think it would be really important to be able to gather that kind of data and to know, how do we shift this? Because it certainly improves their life chances of, being successful, self-directed, maybe happier people down the road. So the other thing that let me see if I can find it. Noticed was the section that you didn't touch on, because of course there's so much, was on bereavement. And the fact that 81% of the students have had an experience of death in their families. And you can imagine what this must do for their sort of sense of wellness and, well-being and all that sort of stuff when they're going to school every day, trying to do the best they can, you would think. So it's not just COVID, it's other illness, overdose, and then suicide. So I find these very revealing and also very disturbing as well. And given they are in 218, but one wonders in 23, how are we doing with that?
Yeah.
And then how are we as a school district, including those people who support our students, how are we doing to kind of address that reality? I mean, I don't expect you to have an answer. I'm just sort of giving you a rhetorical question about the level of concern I think we need to get to this kind of data.
I have a note, I wonder, and that is, how closely do you think the Ministry of Education and Childcare reviews the provincial results of this, and how related is it to the
I think,
support?
I think that's a great question. I think they do review it closely, especially when it comes to the student learning survey and compare it to the McCreary report and see, are the trends the same? Some of the trends that McCreary reports do mirror pretty effectively what we're seeing in the student learning survey. There's a few outliers, but I think they do compare them both.
Trustee Hagan?
I just think it goes to show again how the complexity of the community in which we're trying to introduce education. We always say we've got the basics. Well, I'm sorry, education is way more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with young children who are going to be our future. And we're having a hard time bringing just the adequate skills necessary to survive in this world today. And that's, I guess it brings to us and brings to light the fact that Parents have to be involved. We all have to be on the same team here. If we're gonna have children coming to school hungry, then we should know about it and what have we got in place for that. But it's so complex that you just wonder, you know, when you put all this time and energy and effort in with teachers and with all the educators that we have and the bus drivers, that still, they don't even like school. That's how complicated it is. And we're competing with the internet, we're competing with drugs and alcohol, suicide, death, and poor family management and poor school management, perhaps. And I just think we can all do a better job, but it just needs to be seen that the money that we get and we try to balance so carefully isn't always where it should be spent and isn't always necessarily enough money to provide satisfaction for all the needs that we see demonstrated in our school system. It was just an observation that how complex education has become.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, you know, one of the things that really highlighted for me in the McCreary report was, you know, where you're seeing the kids coming to school hungry, and I will hats off to the ministry for their Feeding Futures and their family fund. They have been really pumping a lot of money into the system there. So, you know, according to our local stats, it's something that we really need. So we're really happy to have that and to try to help out as much as we can.
Further comments? Thank you, Superintendent Manning. The McCreary report really gives us an opportunity to look at our kids as whole people. And I just want to highlight the increase in those statistics are creating challenges in classrooms. And I want to highlight the efforts of our educators and our employees in the system for dealing with the changes as best they can with the resources that they have. Thank you for the report. All right, on to agenda item 14A, which is business administration and the minor capital plan amendment. Secretary Treasurer Patrick.
Yeah, so this is the next step. I brought the board resolution 2 meetings ago, and the ministry agreed to that board request. Now they're asking the board to pass a capital bylaw, which would then give us access to the money for this amendment. So this amendment is an additional $233,000 for, really it's for heritage lines, but we've identified it as a Timberline HVAC upgrade. And the key with this though is the board approves it tonight, we send it in tomorrow, we need the money next week because the deadline is the end of the month. So this was that project where we were very fortunate to get what was leftover money at the ministry that was available for sort of late requests. This request came about probably summer. It was after we had submitted our original capital plan. So we know that this happens, and so we were ready for the request when we were notified that it was extra money. And yeah, with a bylaw tonight, we can have it in our bank account next week.
Megan?
The motion is being written down?
We need
Yep.
a bylaw, so all three.
So the bylaw, the first motion is that the capital plan bylaw number 2324, CPSD 7204 for projects identified in the March 4th, 2024 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education and Childcare be given all 3 readings at this meeting. So moved by Trustee Hagan. May I have a seconder? Trustee Harper, all those in favor? Excellent. So before we move on to the motion, is there any questions or comments on the report letters presented by Secretary Treasurer Patrick? I have a quick question. So the school food infrastructure program, is that the new acronym for Feeding Futures?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and what you see in there is the bolded is the new request. So that everything you see on there is the capital plan approvals for this current year. The ministry fiscal year ends March 31st. As of April 1st, we'll have a new year. So we'll be back again for those items in April.
All right, so do you have a question, trustee Hagan? Okay, so the motion reads that the capital bylaw plan number 2324, CPSD 7204 for projects identified in the March 4th, 2024 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education and Childcare is hereby read for the first time. Moved by trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee Gillis. All those in favor? Sorry, guys, I gotta do it another 2 times. That the capital plan bylaw number 2324 CPSD 7204 for projects identified in the March 4th, 2024 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education and Childcare is hereby read for the second time. Trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee Harper. All those in favor? And the final reading that the capital plan bylaw number 2324 CPSD 7202 for projects identified in the March 4th, 2024 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education and Childcare is hereby read for the 3rd time passed and adopted. Trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee Briggs. All those in favor? Thank you. And it has been adopted.
Thank you.
Thought you guys were gonna pause me out on the 3rd reading there and make me read it again. Yes, yes, hopefully it's a short motion. Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Patrick. On to finance warrant number 7 with an end date of January 31st, 2024. This is standard protocol in SD 72. So the motion reads that finance warrant number 7 dated January 31st, 2024 be accepted as presented. Trustee Gladish, seconded by trustee Hagan. All those in favor? Thank you. And on to the facility plan update, Secretary Treasurer Patrick.
Yeah, I thought I'd provide an update because things are picking up speed with our long-range facility plan consultation. So really the first big step is actually booking meetings with our Indigenous partners in town, actually in our district. So I want to let the board know that we are having meetings with Weewakai, separate, Weewaikum, Pamalco, Plahoose, and we are also going to be meeting with the Tlawitzis to talk to the chief, the administrator, and the education director to talk about nation and community wishes for future use of education facilities, look at demographics, what they see coming, housing changes, things like that. So we have booked our first meeting just after spring break, and we will be having a series of those. On the school district side, we will be having the superintendent, myself, the director of Indigenous Education, and our 2 facilitators from Studio Home for the first meeting. And then it'll be the superintendent, director of Indigenous Ed, and myself for the subsequent meetings. We have the facilitators in for just 2 days, and they're going to be busy all around. But I really wanted to make sure that we have the first meeting with them with an Indigenous partner, and that will be with Weewaikai. And so we'll see that roll out over the next probably month after spring break. And we will also be having our first long-range facility plan committee meeting with representatives from principals, senior management team, just at the same time and in the middle of April. And yeah, so it's probably taken a little bit longer to get those meetings booked and ready. We're still will likely be getting near conclusion at the end of this school year. And yeah, that'll be our next 10-year plan. So yeah, like we're getting out there and we're going to be starting those meetings.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Patrick. Is there any questions? Thank you for the update. On to committee reports. Vice Chair Gillis, the City of Campbell River School District 72 liaison meeting.
Yeah, just a few highlights. This is a meeting that occurs twice a year, usually once in the fall and once in the spring, and involves representatives from the city council and from our administrative, senior management team and, you and I. Yes. And it's primarily to build some understanding and create some opportunity to ask questions about, primarily issues that pertain to both of us in our jurisdictions. And we spent some time discussing transportation, just looking at key corridors, speed zones, some of the major arteries, just looking at or reviewing what one another were attempting to do, at least to understand channels of traffic. We had our 10-year plan presented or at least referenced in terms of addressing or predicting growth that could impact boundaries or reconfiguring boundary use. There was some talk about snow removal and ice control this year, and fortunately, all has been fairly positive this year, but I took credit for it because I bought a snow blower last year, so I didn't need it. Anyway, they were very happy. They got some, I think, very positive responses a few times. There was heavy snow, it was dealt with very quickly. They talked about their city's housing accelerator funding for about 850 to 1,200 units that were reported in the local paper. Associate Superintendent Bill Sismic gave them a very good update on the childcare projects. They did 7 different centers with their timelines and really emphasized the importance of wonderful management on the team and real efforts to create a template that had been able to reduce costs and savings, and things are looking very positive. We're looking at one of the first to open in a month. Also sharing, of course, with great pride, the strategic plan. And I think they all got their personalized copy. And yeah, I think it gave them a real feet on the ground opportunity to review it and ask questions. And I think one of our final issues was just talking about the Ishikari exchange that's been reached its 40th year. And it's in a bit of a, I don't know if we'll say crisis, but at this point, it's not the same economic development and student education program that once existed. There was a time when we had 30 students traveling in the odd years as young ambassadors for 9 or 10 days and 30 coming here. And then we had 2 full-year exchange students that would go at the same time. There's a big question about the sustainability of the program. It hasn't attracted the same interest over time. And so I think there's a group, again, it's like many organizations finding leadership to take on those roles. There is a delegation going from the community in April, I think it's early April, just to solidify some of the kind of relationships and partnerships. So I believe that's, if anyone has further points. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to feed in, there was some conversations around the master transportation plan through the city of Campbell River, because Craig did ask some very real questions around some of the pinch points at Kerry High and Ripple Rock. And we did raise the concerns about the public transit strike and attendance in our schools. So the master transportation plan is meant to take into account school district ridership as they're redeveloping.
Thank you.
On to 15B, Student Leadership Committee update. Trustee Briggs.
You met March 7th at Timberline this time. From Phoenix, Sufgate, Timberline, and Kerry High, from grades 7 to 12. Kevin put together a really fun multiple choice budget questions. They actually really enjoyed it. It was really fun. To get ideas from students regarding the budget. So there was questions: what would make your learning more fun? What would make you feel safer at school? And what would help students that don't like school enjoy school more. So they've had lots of feedback for us, things that we've heard before and some things that were new. And I think they felt really heard when we told them that the in the background issues being looked at, that comes up every meeting. We talked about having just one more meeting before the end of the school year, and they were adamant that we are having two. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Trustee Briggs. That's, it's uplifting, you know, that students really want to have their voices heard.
They're very engaged.
That's awesome to hear. Yes, Trustee Hagan.
Yeah, is there some kind of recognition that goes in for the students who are involved in all of this? Does this go towards their report cards and towards their scholarship applications and those kinds of things that they're taking time out to attend Student Voice, or do we know?
I think it definitely could be listed on their applications, for sure. I would encourage them to do so. And maybe Natalie, you can reach out and say, hey, if you are applying and you haven't listed this.
I usually
Yeah.
reach out to the grade
Yeah.
12s and
Yeah.
that, I mean, we're available to support applications with a reference to their participation and get a lovely certificate.
Oh, good. Nice, Natalie.
Yeah, our meeting, Natalie makes sure to make it like a
Oh,
celebration. with
real
pizza.
official looking and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Secretary Treasurer Patrick, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and I suspect that the ultimate reward is that you'll see many of these faces sitting around tables like these in the future because they're all leaders, community leaders.
Gold stickers go on your shirt. Go along with it.
Trustee Gills?
Yeah, just one thought that, sometimes my thoughts come later. Just in reference to student recognition, and I want to thank, Natalie, because what happens after those scholarships are awarded is every one of the organizations that has awarded a scholarship gets a photo of the students receiving their scholarship with a thank you letter. It must take hours, but that is in itself too, I think, a real incentive or reward for the contributing organizations in our community. So thank you.
Thank you. On to 15C, which is the BC Public School Employer Association meeting. We did have a meeting last week. Just so everyone is aware, contract negotiations are set to begin on local matters. Teachers will go first, beginning in November. Negotiating through until February. There is an end date, I believe. So BCPC really has just done an update for new trustee representatives around what negotiations look like, what BCPC's role is in representing the employer negotiations, and reminded trustees that contract end dates are June 30th, 2025 for both BCTF and QB unions. And that's about it on BCPC. On to the Vista Spring Conference, the Vancouver Island School Trustees Association.
Right, I summarized my notes, so you guys get the benefit of looking at it, because I'm not gonna go over all of them. And I'm really bad at photocopying and stapling and all that, so, you know, if you get to the same page and they're all, whatever, just live with it, okay? So usually I always have someone help me with that, but anyway, so Chair Eddie, Superintendent Manning and myself attended that, and I want you to know that we were there for about 24 hours, including sleeping, and we were in session for about 16 of those hours. So they really worked us. It was amazing, you know? So I guess a couple of the highlights of that meeting were two student presentations. One was from School District 85 from Port Hardy, and they gave a presentation on the Kwakwakiwak treasures that they've had, which sort of comes out of the potlatch, the songs, the dances and the stories and the ceremonial objects. Those were all on display, and it was really, really well done, really well facilitated. So it's something that we might think about when we host. I mean, they were amazing. And I think it probably was best summarized by Elder Evelyn Voyager, whom I haven't seen for probably 40 years. Her daughter was my roommate in first year. She said that she has seen so many significant changes over the years that have occurred in education with regard to indigenizing education. So I just was so happy to hear what she said. There's a line that summarizes their approach to their work. And I thought, okay, this is great. It says, all partners work toward academic success. And that means, you know, embracing everything cultural and social, emotional, all those kinds of things. So it's great. The second very powerful presentation was on climate change by the students from Qualicum School District. And they were absolutely amazing. They talked about all the things that they've done. And they were from as young as grade 9 all the way to grade 12. And at the end, they got a standing ovation and they were blown away. Some of them cried. They have organized things like collaborative art projects for Fridays for Future. I know that this was happening in this district, but I haven't seen it for a while. But they're still continuing with this, which is really nice. So they pose the questions. And, you know, I always think questions help us to kind of frame where we are. The 3 questions I asked us is, first one, what am I doing? What is our school district doing? And how do we collaborate with others across this island? So I guess maybe they're extending an invitation, maybe even to students from our district to get more involved in that. Yeah, and they talked about how powerful their collective voices have been in terms of making some big changes in their district. One thing they've done that was, I think, really innovative was they initiated a peer listener support in schools where kids will go and listen to other kids about things that they're struggling with. So that was really powerful. The other thing I looked up was in 2019, the school district, and you probably know this, Superintendent, joined other BC school boards in passing a motion declaring a climate emergency. So that gives us a little bit of food for thought for ourselves here. So there's a presentation on the Indigenous Education Committee, and their goal is how to get more Indigenous students to graduation and beyond. They had a lot of things to say, you know, how to operationalize UNDRIP, the IEC work plan, and the implications which arise out of the option of having schools of choice. And I like the statements, these little nuggets stick with me sometimes. Larry Ransom, his words, says that they have some mottos in their work, and it is that nothing about us without us, and build relationships. I think those are so integral, and it has so much overlap to almost everything we do in our various places. Let me see. Oh, there's just so much more, but I did write a lot of it down, so I won't go over it quite a bit. One book that we might want to get a hold of is called Navigating Leadership Drift by Michael McDowell and Cale Burke. It was from a presentation given by Dr. Peter Jory, and it just sounds like a very powerful book that we need to get a hold of. So maybe you already have that book. But, you know, maybe we need a copy.
Sure.
And then we had Jason Reed, the Secretary Treasurer, who gave us a very lengthy presentation. And at the end of it, I just thought, okay, at our board meeting, we should just give a really deep bow to our own Secretary Treasurer for all that you guys do. I had no idea. This is just like 4 lines out of like 500 that he does. But one of the things that stuck with me about that is to maintain a culture of continuous improvement on key priorities. And so I think that's a really good way for us to kind of, you know, appreciate what we do, and especially the work that Kevin does for us. And then we had BCPC give us a little bit of information about the fact that the contracts end for teachers soon, you know, in 2025, and also for support staff. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. Some emerging considerations that I think came out of it, and we've talked about the chair, Eddie and I. There's a lot of talk about the accessibility policy, and I understand we have a committee that works on that, and I wondered maybe we need to give a little bit more discussion to that and look at that maybe as a policy review as well. One of the things that Dr. Peter Jory talked about was the fact that so much of what we work on emerges from our mission, vision, and values. And I know that that's an area that we are going to be working on maybe sooner than later to get that done. Policy as a board on climate change. Let me see. And for me, collective bargaining 101, I'm just very, I've been on the other side and passed up and down the streets and all this before in my time as a teacher. But in terms of getting more aware of that, I think we need to have a little bit more on collective bargaining 101 for our board. And then hosting Vista in the fall of 2025. It's going to come up soon, so I think it's never too late to start. So go ahead and read the rest of it. And if you have any questions, just ask me. Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure. Oh my goodness. Oh, you're the best. You're the best. Did you run off and get it?
Yes.
Look at that. Wow. Oh, look at that. Witty and powerful. John Hattie. Thank you. Put my name on it.
Thank you very much, Trustee Gladys, and well done, Associate Superintendent. So the final committee report is the fact that the Strathcona Regional District and SD 72 liaison meeting of March 6th has been rescheduled to May 7th. And both Trustee Briggs and Trustee Gladys said that committee. There is no,
It was rescheduled because there was a lack of agenda items. I was wondering if that, you want to have a discussion about.
what we want to talk to our
Yeah.
district about?
I also understood that there's been some discussion about the terms of reference for our meetings, and maybe you are aware of that correspondence. I had some correspondence on it that I didn't bring with me tonight. But, okay, I'll forward it to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. Maybe we'll start with the terms of reference and then speak forward to agenda items. Is there any questions online for us? Is there any questions from the gallery?
I have a couple.
Okay.
I couldn't find anywhere in the material report how many students participated and how many of those participants out of the 12 possible. Like there was no demographics about what percentage of our study.
Yeah, they stick to percentages. They're pretty strict about the number of students for masking purposes and not identifying students, especially when you get into smaller school districts.
Yeah.
I know they have regional reports that are going to be coming out that will tie us into North Island and Vancouver Island West, Campbell River, and I believe Comox all get put into a North region.
Okay.
So they do some interesting things statistically, but most of it is to keep the students anonymous.
So there isn't something that says like of the 500 kids that could have done the survey, 300 of them in Campbell River did the survey.
No, but we can reach out and ask if those statistics are available.
Okay.
I'm
Great,
happy to do
thanks.
that.
So I guess I'm not gonna ask questions. Sorry. The second question about that same report is, I'm curious how much the ministry may do it, because I was reading in the prologue of that the report cannot be released to the ministry unless directly requested by the district. So I wonder how much they are paying attention, obviously not to individual districts. They would get the provincial McCreary report.
I can actually speak directly to that. Because
Sure.
The ministry actually requests school districts to sign off.
Okay.
And so almost every school district signs off. If you are maybe a tiny school district, you say, hey, I don't think this is good for our school district, I'm not gonna sign off. You have that discussion with the ministry. So almost all districts do.
So that's really just a matter of process,
Yes.
not that it actually doesn't happen. Okay,
Right.
no, that's really That's really great. And then the other question that I had is around the administration, increases. I know that a couple of our schools that were even scheduled for 0.1 didn't have, I think you mentioned full-time or even the 0.1 VPs this year. Are you anticipating that this 0.2 will help make sure that all of our schools have like the planned administration? Or do you think that even at 0.2, we still may have too small a pool to be able to fill those, 0.2 kinds of positions?
Yeah, we feel very confident that they will all be filled.
Great. Okay, no, that's good news. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah Coons. And on to the final agenda item, which is adjournment. Trustee Hagan. Thank you, everyone.